Hi everybody, great to see you. Hope you're having a great Sunday. I'm Hilary, I'm the founder of We Love Smart Keto. Welcome. Have another little chat today, and today we're going to be talking about what is metabolic syndrome, also known as Syndrome X, which is how it was originally described actually, was as Syndrome X. So we're going to talk about it, and it's what is it, why it's important to be aware of it, and how to combat it. Hi Diane. So as today, Diane, we're going to be talking about metabolic syndrome and what it is. Hi everybody, just wait. Hi Barbara, just give me a wave in the comments, or just tell us where you're from. If you're watching live, just put a 1 in the comments, that'd be great. Excellent. So we're going to spend a bit of time, spend a bit of time here talking about metabolic syndrome, and then I got a couple of members' questions at the end, which I'm going to be answering at the end. So we'll be here, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, something like that. So great to have you on board. So what we're going to be talking about is metabolic syndrome. And as you can tell from the title of it, it doesn't sound like a good thing, and it really isn't a good thing. Also, if you've got any questions, feel free to chime in with any questions, and I'll do my best to give you a useful answer, or at least point you in the right direction. Hi Alex, great to see you. Thanks for all your comments in the group. I really appreciate your inputs. Thanks Alex. So with that being said, let's get right to it and talking about metabolic syndrome. So, what is metabolic syndrome, or as it's also called, Syndrome X? Well, basically it's not just one thing, it's a cluster of conditions which, when they occur together, increase your risk of heart disease, stroke and diabetes. So those conditions that make up metabolic syndrome can include increased blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess body fat around your waist, and abnormal triglyceride levels and abnormal cholesterol levels, although it's not all cholesterol, it's just a particular component of cholesterol. So again, each one of those on its own is a bad thing, but together they can wreak havoc on your health and shave a good chunk of years off your life expectancy. So it's definitely something that we don't want. And one of the things to really watch for is that it can take up to 20 years for these things to develop. So it looks fine, the readings look slightly elevated, and then all of a sudden, it can spike up, and you can end up with type 2 diabetes, heart disease issues. So it's something that we have to be very aware and watch for the early symptoms of. So what we really want is a long, happy and healthy life, right? I mean, if you're not really healthy, we can't enjoy life to the fullest. And in fact, in some other Facebook Lives, I'm going to be talking about longevity. There's some really interesting research that's been done. There's a wonderful professor at Harvard called David Sinclair, who's done some really interesting work on longevity. He's got a book that is, it's a doorstopper of a book, but it's an incredibly good book, and I'll be talking about that on another day. So of course we want to extend our life, and we want to extend that and be really, really healthy. I could be alone in this, but I don't think so. I think we all want a long and happy life. And the sad truth is that today metabolic syndrome is increasingly common, and up to 1/3 of US adults have it. So, 1 in 3 people, that's a really high number. And according to the American Heart Association, about 23% of all US adults suffer from the condition. So what are the risk factors? It's excess fat buildup around your middle and the upper parts of the body. So being overweight or obese is a clear risk factor. It doesn't mean that you have diabetes, but it's definitely a risk factor and contributes to, it's one of the factors looked at in metabolic syndrome. The other problem is an increase in insulin resistance, which means that it's exceedingly difficult for your body to process sugar into energy. Insulin resistance also has a fancy term. It's also known as hyperinsulinemia in the medical profession. Hyper just means high, and insulinemia means insulin levels. So insulin resistance is when your body keeps pumping insulin because you can't process the insulin isn't being effective, and so your body goes, well, I need to produce more of it, and eventually that can lead to a collapse in the insulin system in your body. So insulin's primary function is to manage blood sugar, and once it can no longer do that, it means that sugar is left running around doing whatever it wants, causing all kinds of trouble inside of your body. The sugar that's already inside your cells pretty much tends to stay there as fat, and once all those cells are full up and the rest of the sugar is in the blood left unchecked running amok, then it really causes significant health problems. And that can lead to adult onset diabetes, which is also known as type 2 diabetes. If you have diabetes, it means that you get inflammation in the blood vessels, and then that gives you higher risk of stroke, heart disease, and damage to kidneys and nerves, because that's where the smaller blood vessels are, and those blood vessels get inflamed and can no longer manage. So if you have metabolic syndrome or any of its components, if you make really big lifestyle changes, and this is the really great news, that can delay or even prevent the development of some of these serious health problems. And that's really, really great news. And that's what this group is all about. It's about keto lifestyle for a lifetime, living a healthy and happy life. So let's think about, how do you know if you have metabolic syndrome? Well, usually your doctor will diagnose it. They'll do some tests and cross-reference that against some checklists to determine whether whether or not you fit your blood tests and your results fit the bill. So what are the sorts of things that they test? Well, they look at the circumference of your waist. I forget off the top of my head the exact numbers, but I think it's oh golly, I'm a metric person, so something like 88 centimeters for a woman and 102 centimeters, I think, for a man, or a bit more. I'll tell you what, later in the group I'll post those measurements. I can't quite recall off the top of my head what they are, but I will. If anybody knows them, please pop them in the chat. That'd be really helpful. It's blood triglyceride levels, which is sort of broken down fatty acids in your body after a period of fasting. So typically you'll do a fasting glucose test, which we'll talk about in a minute. Your level of particular kinds of cholesterol, not all cholesterol is bad, and your blood pressure and your blood sugar level. So again, after you've done a period of fasting. So there's 5 sort of specific tests in the metabolic syndrome test, and as a general rule, if you have any abnormalities on 3 or more of those tests, typically indicates that you've got metabolic syndrome. And so once you've got metabolic syndrome, it's really time to take some action. In fact, before that is better, of course. Metabolic syndrome, can lead to diabetes, heart attack, kidney disease, stroke, which I've already mentioned. But you're also at risk for fatty liver diseases. So even if you're not an alcoholic, even if you don't even drink alcohol, you can get high fat, fatty liver. So it's called a non-alcoholic fatty liver. You can get cardiovascular disease and peripheral. So that's the ends of the tips of your fingers, tips of your toes, peripheral artery disease. So kind of numbness in those, and that's how people lose toes and things on diabetes. So if you have full-blown diabetes, obviously it's even worse. You can end up diabetics with metabolic syndrome. Usually can have iron nerve problems. You can go blind. My grandfather, who is a type 2 diabetic in his 80s, he certainly went blind, and it was entirely preventable. And we know a lot more now than we knew then. I wish that we had known all these things then, that it was reversible. Kidney disease and on really terrible occasions, people can have limbs amputated. So don't want to do all the gloom and doom, but now that we're all thoroughly traumatized and made aware of how serious a concern this is to your health. In fact, it's probably, well, it is the number one health issue in the country and even in the world, because in the developed world at least, because a healthy body and managing our insulin levels, it manages to avoid so many issues. So just managing our insulin levels, avoiding metabolic syndrome, really makes a massive difference. So what do you do if you're at risk for this condition? Well, the first thing you have to do is accept that you have to change your lifestyle habits. What you've been doing so far has kept you really alive. We've done well to get to the age that we are, but if we want to continue to live happily and healthily, then we need to follow perhaps a new lifestyle process. Thanks, Alex. Yes, I was pretty good on my numbers in the 101 centimeters in men, which is 40 inches in men, and 89 centimeters. I said 88 centimeters in women, which is 35 inches in women. Thanks, Alex. That's really helpful. That's your waist circumference. So lifestyle habits, what do you need to change? Well, a strict and healthy weight loss regimen, which means eating healthier and incorporating routine exercise for at least 30 minutes a day. So that's a brisk walk, something like that. As a minimum, weight training is also excellent for maybe 5 to 7 days a week. If you smoke or drink alcohol, sorry, definitely have to stop doing it. Smoking, obviously, as we know, has a lot of bad indications for our health. But also alcohol, eventually you may be able to have the occasional alcoholic drink, and we'll talk about that on another Facebook Live. But right now, thanks, Alex, not a good plan. So, if you've got, if you're teetering on the edge, your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, which is really the LDL, so the low density protein, they're the ones that that hold the bad cholesterol. They're the ones that are most significant. Or if your blood sugar is high, then your doctor might prescribe meds to bring those levels down faster than your body can do so on its own. So obviously you need to follow your doctor's recommendations, although ask your doctor, challenge, and make sure that you're understanding what they're asking you to do and why. We don't need to follow our doctor's instructions blindly. It's very important that we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and the benefits and risks. So make sure that you ask your doctor the reasons that they've recommended what they've recommended, and if there are any alternatives, if you can try diet-related things first or lifestyle-related things first. Always worth asking. So, being diagnosed with metabolic syndrome can be scary. It can be a bit of a shock, but the great thing to know is that it's treatable. And for some people, it's just the wake-up call they need to change what they're doing. And for others, it can be absolutely life-saving. So, the good thing to know is that metabolic syndrome is treatable. Obviously, if you let it go and it gets into heart disease and diabetes and things, obviously that's much more serious. But certainly, and although those things are reversible, it's harder. Certainly, metabolic syndrome is treatable, and if you look after your health and your long-term well-being, it's probably even better knowing that you've really taken control of your health and done the right things for our body. We can't rely on the medical profession and doctors to give us a pill. We have so much control over what we can do and how we can live. So the first thing is to start with changing your diet, changing what you eat, how often you eat, to some extent the size portions of your meals, although we need to eat until we're comfortably full. And the ratios of both your macronutrients, which are your fats, the carbohydrates, and your proteins, and your micronutrients. It's really about being intentional and aware of how your diet and exercise affects you. It goes a long way to helping you be at the best you can possibly be. And it all starts about making a decision. Let's make a decision to live with intent and purpose, the best life and your healthiest best life that you can live. So, who wouldn't benefit from knowing how to effectively do that? So we've talked a bit, and it's a little bit of a negative topic, but it's really important to understand, to know what metabolic syndrome is, what factors are associated with it, how it affects you, and what you can do to prevent and treat it. So what can you do to prevent and treat it? Let's talk about the best things here. This is where keto comes in, clean keto. For years we've been told, low fat, healthy whole grains, that's the way to go. And we know that actually there's not any evidence to support that. Where there is evidence to support is a low carbohydrate, moderate protein, high fat diet, which is the keto diet. So, we've talked about in other Facebook Lives exactly what the keto diet is. I'm just going to touch on it very briefly here because we've talked about it a lot, but we will come back to it on other Facebook Lives. But basically it is about what you eat. So that's low carbs, so less than 20 grams net carbs per day, and those carbs should largely be from leafy vegetables, vegetables that grow above the ground. So not root vegetables so much, not potatoes, not yams, not things like that. It should be moderate protein, so the right amount of protein for your lean body mass. So that's it's typically a small portion of meat per day. Also, oily fish like salmon, very good as well. And then it's healthy fats. So it's things like olive oils, macadamia oil, avocado oil. Also, things like avocados. Again, they're a fruit, in fact, but they're a good fruit with good fat. And also high fat dairy, so things like cheeses, the occasional high fat yogurt, like a Greek yogurt, as long as it doesn't have any sugar in it. They are reasonable. You've got to be just careful around because they do have a bit of carbohydrate content in them as well. The other thing also is about when you eat. That's the other thing that we can control. So extending periods between meals is also really good. So avoiding snacking, really, really good. Just like our mums told us when we were kids, don't eat that because you're not going to eat your dinner. She is absolutely right. So skipping meals is also beneficial. And if you really want to get a bit more into it, you can do things like time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting. We're not going to talk about that today, but we'll talk about that on other days. So there you go. That's a bit of a summary of metabolic syndrome. Hopefully you've now got a bit of understanding about what it is, and more importantly, how we can prevent it. So give us a like or a comment in the chat if what's been your biggest insight from what we've talked about. Did you know it all? Some of you I know are very knowledgeable. Is there something in particular that you learned that you didn't know previously from today's thanks, that you didn't know before today's session? Now, I had a couple of questions in the group. Maybe somebody could tag these people. Alex, you're here, I think. I've got your question, and also Virginia's question. So I'm just going to read those couple of questions out and answer them as best we can. So Virginia's question is, I've been drinking Slim Fast protein drinks for 6 years. I switched to keto drinks, and I was wondering, do I stop drinking them? I think she means the Slim Fast protein drinks, or how do I incorporate them with the keto diet? I cut all carbs out of my diet. So I had a bit of a look at the Slim Fast protein drinks, and Virginia, and I think, well, there's a couple of things I'd like to say about them. When you look at those drinks, if you look at a serve of them, they have in them, one of them I looked at had 19 grams of carbs in that drink. And with a keto diet, we're aiming at less than 20 grams of carbs per day. In a protein drink, it didn't say how much was total carbs and how much was net carbs, but you can assume it's going to be, because you dissolve it, it's all going to be pretty much soluble fat, and so therefore carbohydrate, and therefore absorbed it. So we'll assume that it's total carbs. So you've got a 20 gram carb limit for the day, and with one drink, you've pretty much taken all of those carbs in one drink. The other thing that I would say about them is that when you look at the list of ingredients, there's ingredient names on there that don't sound natural, that are not ingredients that we are typically in a piece of meat or a vegetable. They've added quite a number of things to those drinks to make them stable and to give them good shelf life largely. So if you like them, and breaking a habit, changing a habit is a challenging thing, and another day we'll talk about changing habits. But what I would suggest is that it's not really compliant with keto. However, it is habit change that we're aiming at here. So what I suggest is that with habits, we don't just get rid of them. What we do is replace them. So what I suggest you might want to do is perhaps instead of drinking a whole drink, perhaps drink half a drink. And then, perhaps the next week after you've done that, see if you can then replace it with something else, like, some sparkling mineral water or some chicken broth, something like that, so that you still feel that you're getting a treat, something that's good. Another one that I like actually is just cacao, which has got lots of great antioxidants in it. So I'll have a teaspoon of cacao with hot water, no sugar, no artificial sweetener, nothing like that. Or they can have erythritol or stevia if you want to. And then just a dash of heavy cream, and that can give you that kind of little treat, little boost kind of thing. So, my suggestion would be, cut out those drinks, but perhaps do it gradually and think about what that drink is giving you. Is it a little bit of a treat? What is it? And see if you can find something else to replace it. And then Alex, your question. I was thinking about cutting my stop time for intermittent fasting to 7 p.m. from 9 p.m. I don't normally get hungry until 3 p.m. This would leave only a 4-hour window to eat. So is that too small of a time frame on intermittent fasting? I've read in other groups 6 to 8 should be ideal for eating time frame on intermittent fasting, yet I know people who go days with fasting. But I was wondering if intermittent fasting was different. Oh, intermittent fasting is a whole another topic. It's quite a big topic, but so one thing I would say is stop eating 3 hours before you go to bed. Okay, so the window doesn't matter so much as it's really beneficial for your system not to eat 3 hours before you go to bed. It just gives your body time to sort of wind down to go to bed and get ready for sleeping. So if you're adding another 3 hours or 2 hours to your window, so say you were doing 16 and let's say 16 and 8, and then you're going to I'm going to get my numbers down, 18 and 6, that's completely fine. The intermittent fasting window is what suits you. In general, we'd say if you're not eating for less than 24 hours, that's really a time-restricted eating rather than fasting, but it's just a term, it's a label, so we can call it intermittent fasting if you like. It's really when you go up a bit longer, that more than 24 hours is technically intermittent fasting. But it's fine. It's really whatever window suits you. Yes, people do longer fasts. 36 hours or 48 hours is not unusual. Dr. Jason Fung, who's really the guru on this, he's done an awful lot of research. He's saying that at the moment going more than 36 hours is not really recommended just with the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. So, I'd say I would potentially be considering longer fasts at this stage. But certainly, if you're going from an 18 hours without eating to 20 hours without eating, that's completely fine. Just, be aware of what time your bedtime is and try not to eat in that 3-hour window before you go to bed. So I hope that answers your question, Alex. I hope that's a little bit useful. So I think we've been on here for a little bit now, so I think it's time to say goodbye and to head off. I hope you found this useful. Please give me a comment, thumbs up. Let me know how you found the session, and if there are any topics that you particularly want me to talk about just add it, post in the group, or just pop it in the comments under this Facebook Live, and I'll do my best. But been great to chat with you, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.